This is Chris Pereira, Senior Director of Public Affairs at Huawei Canada. And with me today are two very special guests. We have Dr. Wayne Roberts and Jim Harris. Dr. Wayne Roberts is Canada's leading thinker in local and urban food systems. He managed the internationally respected Toronto Food Policy Council on behalf of Toronto Public Health for 10 years, up to 2010, and has served on the boards of several major food system nonprofits across North America, including the Community Food Security Coalition, Food Security Canada, Unitarian Service Committee, Seeds of Survival, and Food Share. He also played an instrumental role in helping a variety of municipalities, including Vancouver, Seattle, Los Angeles, Baltimore, Rotterdam, Bristol, Oshawa, and Kingston, to form food policy councils or adopt food charters. And as of last week, I just learned he just received a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Canadian Association of Food Studies. So congratulations.
Thank you,
Robert, thanks for being here. And of course, my good friend Jim Harris is with us also. He's one of North America's foremost thinkers on disruptive innovation, speaking internationally at more than 50 conferences every year. Association Magazine ranked him as one of North America's top 10 speakers. Jim also leads strategic planning sessions with executive teams, and he is here with us today. Jim's latest book, Blindsided, is published in 80 countries worldwide and is #1 international bestseller. Soundview Executive Summary selected Blindsided as one of the best business books of the year, sending a summary to 80,000 executives globally. And the Miami Herald calls Blindsided brilliant stuff. And I am very happy to be here with you both today. So smart agriculture is something that's very close to my heart. I actually worked in agriculture for 3 years in the egg industry, believe it or not. Now I'm in tech. But smart tech and agriculture are actually a very pertinent topic right now in Canada, especially. And just wanted to hear from Jim on disruptive innovation and from Dr. Wayne Roberts on the policy side about what we can expect in smart agriculture moving forward in Canada. So welcome to both of you.
Yeah, thank you.
It's so great to be here. Well, smart agriculture has so many facets. It's like a diamond that has many different facets that you can look at. And one of them is food safety. So if you recall back in 2019, we couldn't eat any Caesar salads for a couple of months. And what it was is there was an E. coli outbreak in romaine lettuce. And so, you know, all romaine lettuce was yanked off the shelves. You couldn't get it in restaurants or anything. It wasn't a really bad outbreak compared to the spinach E. coli outbreak in 2006. And that one, 200 people were hospitalized, people died, and all spinach was yanked off of grocery shelves for 3 weeks while they traced back from, you know, the shelf to the distribution center, to the supplier, to the farm, where this E. coli came from. And in the end, it turned out to be one farm on one day that hadn't sanitized its equipment properly. But that recall cost the spinach industry $100 million. And it had a lot to do with being able to trace back, having the transparency into the supply chain. But Walmart, because food safety is a big issue for Walmart with reputational risk, they've worked with their technology partner, IBM, and Hyperledger, and they've been able to trace back using blockchain it in 2.2 seconds. So imagine that you could have a store worker just scanning each bag of lettuce and knowing exactly which ones were bad without having to test them because they came from that one farm. And so that would save the industry, in this case, $100 million. So we're going to see the use of technology, which is really smart supply chain, in the whole realm of food safety. So we're going to have instant visibility and traceability, or they call it provenance, into the supply chain. And that is a big new trend that technology and smart technology is impacting agriculture. Dr. Wayne,
Yeah.
Well, do you have a comment?
Well, you know, as you're talking, Jim, it strikes me that, you know, when you hear the term smart agriculture, you think of work smarter, not harder, or work use your brain, not your brawn. So I think it's a good term, smart agriculture, because it replaces generation, a long generation of big agriculture, where the slogan was basically you go fence post to fence post using huge machines, huge amount of fertilizer, huge amount of pesticides, huge amount of irrigation water, and the like. And now it's going to be replaced in an era when we know actually we have a shortage of all of these things, either a shortage of water or a shortage of places to put all the fossil fuels that went into all these machines. And so we need to think smarter. And one way that that expresses itself, I think, is in the field of food safety. So usually when we think of food safety, we think of microbes and germs, but we also need to think about toxic materials that may be on the food. And so that one of the, I would say, the biggest things to brag about or praise about smart agriculture is that it allows the farmer to reduce the amount of pesticides and fuel and irrigation water that they need. That reduces the chance for safety problems. Like often irrigation water, for instance, brings in manure, which causes the safety problem in lettuce and greens. So less resources is smarter. It's not doing without, it's doing smarter. And so there was an old slogan in agriculture, but before the big era, which was the best manure on a farmer's field is the footprint of the farmer. Okay, so that the farmer needs to know his or her land really well. Well, now we have drones and other means of technology that allow a farmer to know their land really well. Where exactly are the insects we need to spray against? Where exactly are we short of water, so we need to bring in irrigation? And so that's the kind of thing that we can now have in a very precise kind of way to say, what do we do to reduce the amount of energy, toxics, and resources that are needed, and therefore make food safer for everyone, not just the eater, but the whole planet.
Wayne, in fact, you mentioned the idea that there's more sophistication than some people might think in agriculture. There's a myth that farming is simple and not sophisticated. And so having said that, that also sort of touches on labor and how we view people who are in the agriculture industry. To get right to the point, are we all going to be automated and we're going to lose our jobs?
Well, you know that the number of people who are on the land has dramatically reduced since 1900. So in many countries, even after World War II in Europe, 1 out of 2 people was living on the land or producing for themselves. And now we're in an area where one farmer can often feed as many as 200 people. But there's just as many people actually working in food now as worked in food 150 years ago, if you count waiters and waitresses and truck drivers and the like. And so I think we may have redistribution of people, but I don't think we're going to see the elimination, because food it's a high touch industry, and it's not going to be losing people altogether anytime soon. In fact, I think all sorts of people now are buying more locally because they want to know the people who produce their food. So one thing that at least I'm hoping for is that what you may call the drudge labor, the back-breaking stoop labor, can be automated. If we're intelligent about this, we'll use the technology to replace back-breaking labor and not to produce human relationships. And we'll move it to take labor out of back-breaking labor and put it into enriching relationships, where everyone in the food industry, for instance, knows something about nutrition, where they know where the food came from, and all of those kind of things that make people more comfortable and more efficient as consumers and buying healthier food.
Very good point.
It's really quite interesting, because we're living in the time of COVID, and the way many Canadian farms have worked is to rely on migrant labor, temporary labor from, say, Mexico, to plant or to pick or to weed crops. But in the time of banning or locking down travel, this is a problem for some Canadian farmers. and there have been some COVID outbreaks in the accommodation shelters for migrant workers. So we may see some automation. There's a great video on YouTube you can watch about a robot picking yellow peppers, and it's got a camera and it looks at the pepper. Is it ripe? It says yes. A little saw comes out and saws it off and drops down and gently catches it. So we may see, as a result of COVID, more automation that Wayne was talking about that back-breaking work.
Yeah, and also I think one of the big lessons of COVID that's I think the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations has emphasized that we found that our long distance food systems were too brittle in the event of a disaster or a pandemic. And so there's going to be more local food production. I think of what you may call everyday staples, like everyday vegetables and fruit, as distinct from exotic things that we like as a treat. And so I think that there is going to be a reduction in the number of people who are migrating around the world to do jobs that they're traveling, and then the food is traveling huge amounts of miles. And instead we'll have less travel of labor and less travel of basic foods. And therefore we won't have a lot of the concentration of people in facilities that lead to contagious disease spreading very easily. That's my hope at any rate.
It's actually interesting. We don't have food security in Canada. Like, we have way too much beef and we don't have enough fruit and veg. So we send our beef down into the US for processing. And then we bring, if I have a Caesar salad, I talk about the 3,000 mile Caesar salad.
Yeah.
We're getting it trucked up here from California. So we don't have enough fruit and veg to feed ourselves. And so if that border to the US, wherever closed because of something like a pandemic and trucks couldn't get back and forth, we have a problem. So we as Canadians may start orienting ourselves more towards that food self-sufficiency with vertical farms in cities, for instance. And
yeah, I agree.
Small
there's
plots
a bit of
land.
We've run into the law of diminishing returns around big agriculture. For example, it takes about 1 mile of highway, interstate or interprovincial highway, takes about 600 hectares of agricultural land out of commission. So that's for 1 mile. So we want to put more emphasis. Let's use those 640 acres to grow local fruit and vegetables, and focus trade on things that are highly tradable. For example, if we want to eat rice in North America, that's largely going to come from import. So, but we don't need to be doing that with spinach and apples.
Interesting. So if you're looking at the future of the smart agriculture as it becomes more prevalent in Canadian industry, what do you think for a young person graduating into the next 5 or 10 years, what skills do you think would be needed to take advantage of these trends?
Well, one way of looking at what's happened over the last couple of months is that farmers who had a direct relationship with their customers have done very well. And so if you were dealing with an anonymous market, thousands of miles away, nobody knows you, they just said, we're going to cancel that order, you're done. You're a cooked goose, as they would say. So if you have, by contrast, 1,000 people who know you very well but on Facebook and have a high sense of confidence in you, then you're going to be in much better shape. And Japan went through the whole situation of tsunami and then a nuclear fallout without any major disruption because they had a society and a food system that was just saturated with trust. And so that, I think, is becoming a key factor. And so I would say to a young farmer, you got to like people and you got to like communicating with them if you want to enter into farming. It's not an area where you're just going to hop on the tractor and drive up and down.
Well, that's an interesting observation. I've talked to a lot of young people recently, not just in in regards to agriculture, but various industries and tech. And in an age where you would think we don't need as much people skills, and we can just do the tech, do the STEM field, be an engineer. Actually, it's becoming more and more important to be able to speak with people, and rarer at the same time, because people prefer to look at their phones or send a text message rather than pick up the.
Yeah, exactly. I think food is going to become a people industry once again.
Interesting. So, Jim, you're a expert in disruptive innovation, and this is all about sort of the change in agriculture. Just my personal experience in the industry is the willingness to change. What's always worked and what does work is very, very deeply entrenched in the industry. If you have just one example I remember is taking notes for a production line. A piece of paper works just fine to make notes with pen and paper. It's asking someone to put something into a computer can sound superfluous and not useful, and even more inefficient in the short term, So just wanted to hear your thoughts on change and how it could be approached, and should we be afraid of it?
Well, I personally don't think we should be afraid of it. The technology offers us new insights. We started by talking about precision agriculture and farmers being able to know their land and know their crops better than ever before. You can outfit a drone, for instance, with infrared or thermal sensing technology and fly it over your fields, and you can see exactly where plants are water stressed, if they are. And rather than water all your fields, you just have to water immediately where the plants are stressed. And the technology can also be used to predict microclimate, like, is it going to rain today on my fields? And if it is, I don't need to water them because they're going to get water anyways. So technology can be used to really deepen that understanding that the farmer has about his or her land. Similarly, these drones can identify, they can have high-res cameras on them and AI chips and identify if there's a pest or a fungus that is infecting the crop, and if so, where it is. So rather than spray a pesticide over the entire set of crops, you just spray it really very highly targeted on where it's needed. So that kind of thinking can reduce pesticide use by up to 75%. So not that I'm in favor of pesticides, I'm in favor of other methods because people don't want to have pesticides on their food. But if you are going to use pesticides, reducing it by 75% is a step in the right direction. So these technologies offer change, and there's a huge benefit for the farmer, which is reducing input costs. Pesticides and, for instance, nitrogen, to accelerate the growth. You need not apply nitrogen everywhere. You need only apply it where the soil is nitrogen poor. So again, this can have a substantial impact on reducing the input costs for farmers. There are now seeding machines that have real-time sensors for nitrate levels. And so you can nitrogen and nitrates, you can actually apply the fertilizer variable applications on the back end of the combine. So you might end up only using a quarter of the fertilizer that you would have historically used. So precision farming or smart agriculture is a huge opportunity.
I agree totally, Jim. Actually, I think the standard figure that's used is about half the pesticides are unnecessary, and the same with half the fertilizers goes down into the river and lake system and pollutes those waterways and kills fish. So we're actually destroying food in the pursuit of trying to produce more food with fertilizer. So this is definitely the way for agriculture to go, reducing inputs and increasing intelligence.
Oh, that's great. I'm going to do a very bad joke now to say that we had fertile soil for a fruitful discussion.
And the good food for thought.
So thanks very much to both of you for being here, and hope we can talk more about this, because I think for Canada especially, it's a very pertinent topic right now as we move toward the future.
Love to talk again.
Thanks so much, guys.